Okay, it's. I was going to say it's Monday morning. In fact, it's certainly not Monday morning. It's Tuesday morning. Although, honestly, the way these long weekends work, I could have actually suggested it's Wednesday already. It's clearly not the case, but it's a short week and the beginning of a few short weeks in South Africa. My name's Ashraf Garda. Assalamu alaikum. This is the Ashraf Garda Show, and the show itself runs on Salam Media from 8 to 10 a.m. all throughout the month of Ramadan, and therefore it's been really great connecting with you in various ways. Many people up to WhatsApp, and you can do that anytime on any of the big issues that really trouble you, like load shedding 4. We're on load shedding 4, stage 4. From stage 2, we've gone up to stage 4 in the last few minutes. So what do you feel about that? I've been asking the question, should businesses be compensated when there's load shedding? The next question is, okay, yes, who compensates them? A government that's already cash-strapped because they're busy with so many other things, including the national state of disaster coming up again after the KZN and now Eastern Cape floods and what's happening in Langa as well. But something for you to consider, 061 766 0355. You can also voice your comments or text on the various Salam Media social media platforms. So much to talk about. We'll talk to Tessa Dooms coming up shortly. And the issue that we want to pick up on is, how do we upscale the impact and the influence of youth in South Africa? There's a sense that we don't really take the youth seriously. And the oldies are not exactly making this country work too well either, isn't it? So what do we do? How do we upscale their influence? We'll talk about that pretty shortly. You may have followed the story about Mufti Menk and his iftar dinner in the United Arab Emirates. Lots of different thoughts about whether you should be there, seated next to this rabbi, very pro-Zionist rabbi, and whether his position there sort of gave a semblance of normality with regard to the relations between Israel and the UAE. We will talk about that. In particular, we're going to play his sound, Mufti Meng's sound, in terms of his own thoughts, and we'll also get a comment from Tembisa Fakode about just that. So look out for that, besides all the other big stories, right? The show itself is brought to you by the African Muslims Agency. Imagine a world where every family has food for suhoor and iftar in Ramadan. Well, you can change that. Call the AMA on 010 0722 262.
You're listening to Salam Media, world-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic Sharia and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider. Imagine the joy of receiving a meal for suhoor or iftar. This Ramadan, join African Muslims Agency to provide meals to the fasting for 100 Rand a day, a food hamper for 1,500 Rand, or feed a village for 15,000 Rand per day. Imagine if you could earn Allah's forgiveness in these 10 days through your acts of charity. Donate today. Call AMA on 011-834-8685 or donate online. African Muslims Agency, commemorating 35 years of empowering, educating, inspiring.
Are you looking for a cross-border road transport company that is committed in achieving high safety standards, who is fast and efficient, and also excellent customer service? Gardi Global specializes in cross-border transport from South Africa to Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. Gardi Global, situated at 10 Daniel Road, Bend Road, Johannesburg. For inquiries, contact our trained staff on 011-614-3108 or email info@gardiglobal.co.za. Safe, long haul into Africa is our business. Gardi Global Transport.
Zakah has the power to end extreme poverty. If the whole world gave zakah, it could end extreme poverty many times over. Islamic Relief has been distributing zakah for over 38 years. our Zakah policy complies with strict Sharia guidelines. It's endorsed by qualified scholars, and it only goes to eligible rights holders. So, harness the power of your Zakah with Islamic relief.
It's been a household name for years. It's been an important ingredient in South African kitchens, and it's been an affordable, healthy choice for your family. Helios. First our pure sunflower cooking oil, and now introducing Helios margarines and spreads. Following the same traditions and tastes you've grown to love and trust from Helios. Fortified with vitamins A, D, and E, also rich in omega-3 and 6 essential fatty acids for a healthy eating lifestyle. Helios margarine and spreads. Available now at all leading South African supermarkets. Helios margarine. The tradition lives on.
The global wheat market is in turmoil and prices have risen rapidly. This places the most vulnerable Syrians at greater risk of hunger and food insecurity. Sponsor a ton of flour at just 7,500 Rand and help ensure displaced Syrian families get their daily bread. Donate flour for Syria online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
This is the Ashraf Garda Show. 8 to 10 a.m. You are listening to Salam Media.
So much to talk about. In fact, I've asked this question from a stage 4 load shedding once again. Should businesses be financially compensated? Businesses that incur losses or revenue losses because of load shedding, should they be compensated? And if so, by government? Just asking, yes or no. You can certainly comment on that. And the best way to do that is quick WhatsApp voice note, as always. They are most welcome. Or you can comment on the back of the Salam Media social media platforms. 061 766 0355 is the WhatsApp voice note number, or text. Okay. So every day, besides the holidays, we look at some of the big pictures and some of the big pressing issues in our country. And today's the big issue, the big picture, really, into youth. And I'm particularly interested in how do we upscale the impact of youth, their impact and their influence in our country, because we say, we're a young country. We say South Africa is to become this champion nation that I often talk about. And how do we do all of that? And we also know that the current way that we're running our country is just not working. So I'm not suggesting a complete shift from A to B, but surely the brain's trust resides within the youth, isn't it? So let's find out more about that with Tessa Dooms, once involved as a National Planning Commissioner around youth at the National Planning Commission, but now the director at the Rivonia Circle. Tessa, good chatting to you. Good morning.
Good morning, Ashraf.
Thank you. Well, it's no surprise when we were last on a brand essay platform, about a month ago, I think it is, that you once again emphasized the fact that even the youth voices at that platform, there was just not enough of them in the official places, people sitting on the same platforms on top, like me, right? How much of a concern is that we are essentially taking the youth for granted?
Well, it is a great concern. In a country that has 66% of the population under the age of 35, young people are at the center of the society in every way that counts. So if you think about it in terms of the youth age, which is 14 to 35, a bulk of our population sits there. But those people then also represent people who are caregivers to children who are under the age of 35 as well. And many of them are parents. Many of them are responsible for children in our society. And then if you think about that same age group also then bears much responsibility for other members of their families, for older members of their families, and many of those who the state has very little resources for. So young people really sit at the center of our society, yet they're at the margins of our politics, they're at the margins of our leadership and the margins of our public discourse. And we really need to change
why do you think? And why do you think that's the case? I mean, we'll talk about the how in a moment, but why are they not sitting in the center of our public discourse?
They're not sitting in the center of our public discourse because we as older people don't allow them to. It's as simple as that. There's a narrative that's developed in post-apartheid South Africa that young people need to fight for their place at the table, and young people need to fight for relevance, and they need to fight for this, and they need to fight for that. And I find that narrative to be not only problematic, but I think limiting in our success as a country. In a free South Africa, why should the majority of the population fight for anything? They really shouldn't have to, be scratching at the doors of power. We should be opening the doors of power to young people and asking them for their unique insights into this country, because they do have unique insights, because they have unique experiences. We should be tapping into their potential. We should be tapping into a knowledge base that we've hopefully helped them create. Instead of seeing young people as competitors for power, we should be sharing power with young people, because it's in our best interest in a society that's dominated by young people.
So in the absence of all of the above, all the things you've just said, right, how is that costing South Africa right now?
So right now, it's costing us in terms of our economy. The first big thing that we're losing out on is because youth unemployment is around 70% in this country. That is about 30% higher than the average unemployment rate. What we're losing out on is a skill base and a set of new ideas and a set of new ways of doing our country's economy and doing governance in general. So we're just losing out on people's ability to create economies. A lot of our efforts, even in the youth employment space, is misdirected. It's misdirected at giving companies big tax incentives. It's misdirected at trying to grow big formal corporations. It is not directed at sustainable youth employment. So if you think about schemes like the YES initiative and many other initiatives that are internship driven, a lot of it is really about creating a loop of labor, of youth labor that comes in and out of systems, sometimes is not tapped into at all, but just used and leveraged for the gain of big corporations and basically government's ability to move money around. But none of it really actually contributes to kind of sustainable creation of jobs and of opportunities for young people to engage in the economy in productive ways.
Well, that already is sufficient food for thought on the first working day of the week, and I'm glad that you've raised all those issues. So then moving forward, right? So we both agree. I certainly agree that youth needs to play a bigger role. They need to be absolutely at the center of decision making across the country, especially. And I don't mean the word children. Don't use it lightly when we say children are the future. Well, at what stage does the future become the now, right? So I think we're on side on that. The question then to you, Tessa, is the how. So considering what we have right now, what should be done? Are there like 3 or 4 key points that needs to happen right now, implement, to change, so that when you and I have a conversation in a year or two, we talk a different language?
There are a few things that we need to do. The first is we need to take youth development much more seriously in the country. We need an actual plan that says, this is what we are developing young people towards. And these are the 3 or 4 things that in the stage of young people's greatest vulnerability, which is around the ages of 15 to 24, we are going to make sure that every young person in this country has access to certain kinds of support and resources, like psychosocial support, like economic migration from education into the economy, and opportunities for them to develop and grow businesses. But the most important thing that we need to think about going forward is young people's political leadership in this country, their ability to lead in different spaces. What we're losing out on, besides young people's economic capacity, is their ability to mobilize each other and themselves towards particular goals. So we often talk about an army of young people across the country who are community activists, who are young people who mobilize, who do all sorts of work in society, then are never compensated for that work, and they're never actually seen as leaders who are giving intellectual and societal leadership. And I think we need to start leveraging that more than ever. The country is ready to be led by its youth. I'm ready to be led by the young people in this country, because I recognize not only in terms of the demographic dividend that it provides us, but certainly in terms of the ability to see a future that is better than the past. Young people are better at that than older people are, because a lot of us, in terms of our history, are stuck in the kinds of things that we grew up with, the kinds of things that we want for ourselves. But young people can catapult a society to think about things in very different ways. And I think we're losing out on that unless we allow young people to lead.
Okay, lots being said. Let's break it down. When you say, you are ready to be led by the youth. So let me understand, does led mean what? Does that mean political leadership, or does that mean, leadership at community or at business level? Where?
at all levels of society. So politically, I think we've caught up with or got caught in ANC culture of creating youth wings, for example, where we ring fence spaces for young people and tell them, your leaders in waiting, go and lead there, lead each other. But in a society that's democratic and where you have a large proportion of your society that is young, representation matters. And so our political representation needs to be younger, even just at the point that we want to be democratic and we want to be a society where people feel that they can lead themselves. Young people are not part of that at the moment. So we must be ready to be led politically by young people in order to give people a sense of representation and access to power. But at all levels of society, young people bring different kinds of skills. They bring different kinds of viewpoints and vantage points into all spaces. So speaking a few years ago to the mayor of Berlin at the time, and asking him about the ways in which young entrepreneurs are supported in Berlin, he said the most common form of support is big businesses that give space, actual physical spaces in their buildings to young entrepreneurs to set up their offices. They provide structural support. They provide support to markets because it's usually people in the same value chain. And my question to him is, what do those businesses get in return for doing that? And he said nothing. He was actually bemused by the question. He said what they get is the benefit of young people's energy, time, and talent in their space, and a country that benefits off its young people. Because in a country like Germany, in all of Europe, young people are seen as a rare commodity. And so when young people are willing to do things and able to do things, they are nurtured, supported, and they're embraced. In our society, maybe we have too many young people and we take for granted that, the young people are just there in their masses and we don't treat them like they are a valuable part of our society.
Okay, so to then pick up on the issue of the political leadership, you made the point about the ANC, but it's not just the ANC. Just about all these political parties have got youth leadership or sort of youth forums, right? Are you suggesting disbanding those youth forums because within the senior political parties?
Yes, I am. I absolutely am. I think what's happened within politics is that youth wings and youth leagues and those kinds of structures have become ways to keep young people out as opposed to bring them in meaningfully. It makes no sense to me, for example, that, the ANC Youth League is currently going through its own contestations for power. But there are people who are in the ANC Youth League who've been in the party for more than 10 years. They're still youth leaders today, and they're still contesting for youth league power, when in fact they have the political experience. They're over the age of 30. They have experience, many of them in other workplaces, in leadership, running their own companies, yet they're not even given the opportunity or encouraged to vie for their own standing within the NEC. There are people with PhDs who've started institutes of learning, who are part of that cadre of leaders who are not vying for the top jobs in the ANC, while you have 60 and 70-year-olds vying for those top leadership positions. It makes no sense at this point because, again, representation matters. The majority of the countries, they're not represented or taken seriously. But number two, you have this lag in leadership, and you have what I call the missing middle of leadership that's starting to develop within political spaces, where people who should have been leading this country are now having to fight now to lead the country in their 40s and their 50s, and will be hogging space for yet another generation and a generation thereafter. We are losing out on the opportunity to be led by the Sankaras of the world because we are holding on to power for our own sake.
And if I run through, all the political parties, not just the party in government, do you get a sense from surveys maybe that you've done that any of the political parties are ready to buy into implementing the type of philosophy that you just expounded on?
Well, there are political parties, particularly ones in parliament, that have been led by young people and are being led by young people. The EFF and the ATM, for example, are two examples of people. Julius Malema, when he started the EFF, was still in the youth age bracket, and the leader of the ATM is somebody who's in the youth age bracket. But there are parties, and particularly parties who don't have youth structures. And the EFF has a student command, but it doesn't have a youth wing, for example. So it's when you start breaking those kinds of political cultures that create very separate spaces for young people that you don't get them emerging. But when you don't do that, young people automatically start to swell the ranks. The DA actually, even though it had youth structures, has done particularly well within Parliament and in the legislatures, the provincial legislatures, in getting young people into those kinds of seats as well. And it did that again by creating a political school that started to bring in especially young Black talent into the DA and gave them a pathway into important decision-making spaces. And so it's absolutely possible to do this. It's not something that is foreign, in political terms to us, to be able to create these structures. We just need to do them much more intentionally, and we need to get to the point where we stop hogging spaces.
And in terms of where you are, I mean, I made a point in the intro where, Tessa, that you involved as an insider with the National Planning Commission, and now at Trivonia Circle. And I saw you, you tweeted the other day, like, you're exactly where you want to be, right? How do you think, even in the short term already now, the narrative that you're expounding is changing? Was what I'm saying is the conversation you and I are having is probably no different to the conversations you and I have had maybe 3 years back.
Yeah, I think the narrative is shifting very slowly, but I think it hinges on one particular thing, the idea of people's power and advancing the idea of people's power in our society. And that may not seem like it's a youth issue, but again, our demographics tell us that it is. The more we take seriously that all South Africans and all people in this country need to participate in the creation of this country, need to participate in the leadership of this country and the ways in which we find solutions for this country, the more you'll realize young people will get involved. In the work that we're doing in Rivonia Circle, we've now worked in various communities where we're doing community-driven solutions, and a program called Democracy Builder where we're encouraging community-driven solutions. And in every one of the convenings that we've had them in Limpopo, we've had them in the Northwest, we're having one in the next few days in Tembisa. In every one of those convenings, number one, they were held by young people. Young people helped us organize and mobilize those spaces and bring activists into those spaces. And the majority of those activists have been young people, not because we've asked for young people, but because young people have had the energy and the interest to do it. And so you have at the moment in Limpopo, young people who've developed a safety app for Venda, and are starting to think about the ways to connect the police station, local police station, and other resources to the communities in different ways. Young people have the foresight to do that, and they have the audacity and the tenaciousness to go out and seek solutions that nobody in Venda has thought about before. And that's the point I'm making, is that really young people are going to come into the fray if we say that the people of this country need to take power for themselves. We need to acknowledge what people are doing. It mustn't just be government-centric. It must be community-centric and people-centric. And we'll see the fruits of that very quickly and very easily, and we'll see young people's talents come to the fore.
You made the point earlier about young youth activism and how many of them have already fed into, I would suggest, community projects, NGOs, NPOs, and done superbly well, right? But most of them would have probably been doing it on an honorary basis, because that's the nature of that sort of activism. And you link that to the fact that we've got 70% unemployment. So touch on what I think you said, that they must be compensated, because by getting some sort of a revenue generator for themselves, even at a lower level, you would turn these unemployed but brilliant minds into effectively some form of employment.
Yes, in Europe and the US, one of the things they've gotten right, and this is particularly true of the US, which you don't expect to be a kind of socially driven society in terms of the way the economy works. But government spends a lot of its resources channeling it into community organizations and NGOs that are doing work that supplement government's agenda and supplement the work that government wants to do. So in South Africa, you have a Department of Social Development that has a registry of NGOs, but doesn't actually fund those NGOs in any systematic way that helps us contribute towards government's objectives. And that's what we call the social economy and the care economy. Those are actual economic spaces. They're actual value generating spaces, because the economy is a place where people generate value and they get reward. And in our society, you have young community activists who generate value. They help older people make sure that they get to hospitals on time. They're ensuring that people who are destitute are able to access food parcels when they need it. They hold ward councillors to account for dealing with sewage in their streets. All of those are value-adding things, and we get the reward as a society, but those young people end up permanently unemployed because they're seen as volunteers to the country in a context of 70% youth unemployment. Whereas in the US, somebody like that would be able to apply for a grant to do that kind of work actively, get that money, be accountable for it in terms of what they've done for their community, and end up being able to pay themselves a salary so that they can make a living off that community work. That's entirely possible. We've seen it even during COVID with government coming up now with the teacher assistant program. That's one example of many where we can start rewarding young people for the kind of community service that they do. There's a national youth service that is wholly unused. It's just it's underutilized as a way to get young people engaged and seen in those spaces of social development and compensated. Until we start to redress that, we're losing out on the opportunity to have young people's values seen in our society and scaled, and we're losing out on the opportunity to redress youth unemployment.
There's so much to pick out on that. I want to end by just picking up on the point about the unemployment. So 70%, I would take it, a percentage of those people are skilled. Some of them are highly skilled, waiting to take up leadership positions, but many of them are unskilled and unemployed, and some may suggest therefore into a position of no hope. How do we address that issue with a degree of urgency that we address the KZN floods, that we address COVID-19 and all these other crises that visit us? How do we address that with incredible speed and urgency?
There are two parts of the youth unemployment value chain that we have not addressed sufficiently. The first one is the supply, the demand side, in terms of employers and making sure that they are ready to absorb young people, and that they are sufficiently motivated to keep those young people and absorb them as sustainable labor. There's something that's broken about the ways in which our formal economy works when it comes to work, and something that is exploitative about it that we have to address through regulatory measures and through a societal shift about the ways in which work is generated in the country. We can no longer beg big business to come to the table and create sustainable jobs. They need to see it as an imperative to create sustainable jobs for young people and to make themselves employers of choice for young people and youth development. But the only way that's going to happen is if we invest properly into a full chain of youth development. So we talk a lot about making young people employable, and by that we focus on things like skills, very rudimentary skills, the interviewing skill, the skill of going to, do your CV. Those are not employability skills. The kinds of skills that young people need to be employable are things like resilience. They need to be able to manage social situations so that they can adapt to different cultural environments, because the work culture is so different from the culture that most young people in this country come from. We need to provide them with a sense of the ability to create and supportive structures on how to create sustainable opportunities for themselves. So we need to do more in terms of our youth development journey as a whole, our psychosocial support, our support in terms of their entrepreneurial abilities and skills, their creative skills, working from where they are, as opposed to just narrowly focusing on this very one-size-fits-all job journey that helps young people with job-seeking skills, but not necessarily job retention skills.
Okay, I can only hope somebody's listening, Tessa, because what you've said is that important. Finally, in the somebody listening, is there somebody currently older, senior, in positions of power and great influence who is actually beating the drum, who is saying exactly what you're saying and has an audience who's latching on to that? Is there somebody?
I mean, that's a great question. I'm sure there are, and there are people who are working in these spaces that are doing this work. So somebody that I can point to is somebody named Lucille Mayers. She runs the Chrysalis Foundation, an academy in the Western Cape. And she does enormous work in this space that says we need to create these kinds of holistic programs for young people's development. And what their program actually does is take young people, deal with issues, psychosocial issues that they have, trauma that they have, and places them into government jobs for a year and helps them to create sustainable pathways to the future. So yes, that's an older person who's definitely beating that kind of drum. And so there definitely are people. The reason why I hesitated is about how seriously those voices are taken and whether they are at the highest levels of our country. I don't think they are. I don't think that in the upper echelons of our country, where it's needed the most, there are older people who are saying it's time for young people to lead.
And I think you are sadly right on that last part, but it does mean that maybe we need to all pay a lot more attention to who's saying what and how does talking then turn into a very clear form of action. Tessa Dooms, it's been great as always talking to you. Feel free to tweet some of the comments that you've just said and just amplify that as well. I'll certainly share that to Tessa Dooms from the Rivonia Circle, director there, and she's made the point so often that, you know, youth has got to be at the center of everything we do, and this conversation, getting the big picture into that, just gives us another reason to have a very closer look at the youth in our country at all levels, in all sectors of society. Where do you sit with regards to propelling the youth to the point of they start influencing South Africa now, not in 20 years' time?